George Osborne, a very good afternoon to you. Let's just address the big theme that David Cameron was talking about today, this idea of a big society, the idea of people taking more control over events in their own lives. Isn't that subsidiarity? Isn't that the kind of localism that the Liberal Democrats were talking about 10 years ago?
Well, I can't remember what the Liberal Democrats, frankly, were talking about 10 years ago. What I'm talking about here is a wholly different approach to British politics and trying to repair trust in a political system that has completely lost the trust of the British public. And we're doing something which politicians, don't normally do. We're saying, look, government alone cannot solve the big social problems, the big economic problems in our country. You know that, I know that. So let's work together, let's build a big society so that government and society and people working together can say we're going to help people set up their own business and build the economy. Can say to people in the public sector, work together in a cooperative perhaps in the local hospital to improve the local quality of healthcare. Work together to save the local post office that the people on high want to close. And it is a very different approach to governing our country, but after all that British politics has been through in the last 2 years, it's absolutely necessary.
What is the role within that for local government? Because some would say if you want local government at the lowest possible, most basic level, you've already got the wherewithal for that. It's called local government, councils, and that's going to further wither on the vine if, for instance, you bring in the idea of a referendum on council taxes, the right to veto council tax rises. That's further going to undermine that most local tier of government.
No, I don't agree with that. We are giving much more power to local government from central government, and we're also giving power to communities. And we're saying when there are big increases in council tax, then they need to seek the consent of the people who pay those council taxes in order to go ahead. So this is involving lower tiers of government, but it's also about involving the public and involving communities. It is about creating that big society, and it's saying to people, be your own boss, sack your MP if you think they've done wrong, and if they have done wrong, save your local community assets, your pub or your post office that is facing closure. Get involved in running your school if you want to improve that. In all sorts of ways, saying to people, look, it is not just politicians sitting within the M25 in the centre of London who know the answer to everything. We've got to work on this together. We are all in this together.
In terms of public spending and cuts to public spending, UKIP had their manifesto launched an hour or so before yours, not a million miles away in Westminster. They make the point, and it's been made by a number of seasoned observers as well, that we've had this argument raging for the last week between you and the government about how to fill a £6 billion stroke £12 billion black hole. But actually, in the context of a £170 billion a year debt, it's nothing. Well,
what I would say is this. There is a very large structural budget deficit, and that was built up by Gordon Brown. He wrecked the public finances, put nothing aside in the good years, and whoever wins the election, Labour or Conservative, is going to have to deal with that. And we were the first party to say there were going to have to be cuts in departmental budgets. So we've been straight about that. But in the end, it comes to a broader philosophy about government. Labour's answer is simply to cut departmental spending but not change the way government operates, and that will mean cut to frontline services under Gordon Brown. We're saying let's also improve and reform the way we deliver government so that good government costs less. And lots of businesses, lots of families have done that over the last 2 years, but government refuses to, and that is the right approach to both dealing with this very large budget deficit but also improving the quality of education and healthcare that a 21st century Britain deserves.
But this was your big opportunity today, George Osborne, wasn't it? This was your big opportunity to really lay out precisely, or relatively precisely, where those departmental cuts are going to be. You spent a lot of time on this manifesto. There it is, hardbound, 120 pages long, all the rest of it. And instead, we're left with something as nebulous as, oh, well, we'll find the cuts through IT projects that don't go ahead, property sales, that kind of thing. The detail still wasn't there.
Well, I disagree with you. Yesterday we had a Labour manifesto that didn't even mention the words national debt. Today in the Conservative manifesto we set out, yes, how we will cut wasteful government spending, and there is plenty of waste in government, and we have the support of many people in the public sector and of course 100 business leaders of other companies on the high street who say that can be done. But we also set out some difficult choices that need to be made on, for example, increasing later in the decade the state pension age, on removing certain benefits that go to better off people in our country. So So preserving tax credits, for example, on people, on modest incomes, but taking them away from families earning more than £50,000, taking those sorts of decisions. Now, there was not a word on anything like that in the Labour manifesto. And this is the case. Whoever wins the election, the budget deficit is the budget deficit. That doesn't change with the election result. What changes, I hope, is you get a government that gets in there, is truthful with the British people about the economic problems, but has a big idea about engaging the country in solving those economic problems and the social problems that give a rise to them, and indeed restoring trust in a political system which has no trust at the moment at all.
We have to leave it right there. George Osborne, Shadow Chancellor, thanks very much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you.
The Sky News Leaders Debate in high definition, April the 27th.